Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good interaction over the coffee break with people that you want to meet or speak to. We'll now do the next part of this session, which is a roundtable discussion. And I want to introduce my colleague Vandana, who will be moderating this session. Vandana is a development sector professional. She started out her career from IIM Ahmedabad. She was an alumni of IIM Ahmedabad. After that, she did a corporate stint and then changed track and went and did a PhD from the University of Grenoble in France. And she's a proficient columnist. She's written for various publications. And currently, she's consulting with us in Microsoft Research. She's helping us sort through some of the strategic kind of direction that we want to take with our societal impact efforts through Sky and other similar activities here. So over to Vandana to introduce the panelists.
Hello, is that audible? Yeah. Hi, welcome to today's panel discussion. We are going to be talking about different aspects of technology and social impact with our 5 distinguished speakers here. So we promise you a lively and interesting 50 to 60 minutes. So let me introduce our speakers. On the extreme right is Dipti Kanade. Dipti is an IS officer of the 2008 batch belonging to the Karnataka cadre. Dipti has been appreciated for the many improvements she has brought in as an administrator, particularly as district collector of Chikbalapur. Until recently, she was director of electronic delivery of citizen services in the government of Karnataka. She is currently on deputation to the central government, serving as director, Department of Space in Bangalore. She has been given the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Administration in 2021. We are honored to have you, Dipti. Next, we have Nataraj Kuntagod. Nataraj is a principal director at Accenture and a sustainability innovator. He has more than 3 decades of expertise in various industries. He previously oversaw Accenture's Technology for Good division. He graduated from the Indian Institute of Science and also holds numerous patents and publications in IoT, healthcare, and supply chain. On my right is Nitin Pai. He's co-founder and director of the Takshshila Institution, an independent center for research and education in public policy. If you have read Mint, Sakal, or The Print, you might have seen his columns. Nitin is a gold medalist from the National University of Singapore's LKY School of Public Policy. He did his undergraduation at Nanyang Technological University. He also spent more than a decade as a technology policy maker in the Singapore government. On my left is Mukesh Sharma. Mukesh is the co-founder and chief investment officer of the Menterra Social Impact Fund. Mukesh is a chartered accountant with over 20 years of experience in building several first-generation companies. He's a strong believer in the game-changing potential of technology and science to address social challenges. So on the extreme left is Bill Thies. Bill Thies is co-founder and technical advisor at Everwell, a spin-off organization from Microsoft Research that develops innovative technologies for national health programs. Bill is a much loved and much admired Microsoft Research alumnus because he was based at MSR for 13 years before he moved out to set up 99 Dots. Bill earned his bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees from MIT. His work has been widely recognized with various awards, including a MacArthur Fellowship. So with that introduction, I'm happy to start today's discussion. Let me start with a question to Dipti. So Dipti, you have been at the forefront of the government's attempts to break barriers between the state and the citizen, particularly through the Seva Sindhu initiative, which you were involved in. Now, the Seva Sindhu initiative, for those who don't know, is an attempt by the Karnataka government to make municipal services and other government services accessible to common people and sort of break the barrier between the state and the citizen. So, Dipti, I want to ask you, what role did technology play in making the Seva Sindhu initiative a success?
Hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this very, very interesting discussion. I have been having a wonderful time listening to all the speakers since morning. Seva Sindhu, is a very ambitious initiative of Government of Karnataka. It was launched in 2018. to offer citizen services or public service delivery in a faceless, paperless, and cashless manner. What started in 2018 with only 35 services across 6 government departments has now evolved into a full-fledged single window agency for the government of Karnataka. We are currently offering 850 services across 80 departments, boards as well as corporations. It's a completely end-to-end digital solution, and technology is really a very big part of Seva Sindhu. If we consider a very typical setup where government services are delivered in a manual way, and mind you, we are not just talking about India or other developing countries, many developed countries even today offer services in a completely manual setup. So, in a classical case, I will, first of all, my problem start with information deficit. I think somebody mentioned in the morning also. Where will I get the application form? What kind of documentation will be required, what kind of fees I will have to pay. I will have to manually go and submit the application. Now, I think I have filled the application right, but is it going to be approved, not approved, whether there will be any reception counter or a dedicated counter for me to go give my application. After giving application, what if they need some kind of clarification from me, how will they reach me? The list goes on and on. So there's a lot of uncertainty associated with the whole public delivery system. And lastly, of course, digital divide, because we are in a country, we are still in a phase where not everybody is very digitally savvy. So these are the problems that any public service delivery system will face. Now, how Seva Sindhu or how technology, which forms big part of Seva Sindhu, has helped us. Information dissemination has been taken in a very big way in Seva Sindhu. All the information about the overview of services, eligibility, fees, documentation, you will only be told address proof. But what document constitutes an address proof? That is another layer of information that needs to be told. So all that information for all 850 services has been made available on our portal. We are completely integrated with Aadhaar, which means that we use Aadhaar for digital eKYC. We are integrated with eSign. We have DigiLocker integration. And we do all our payments, all financial assistance payments using DBT. So we use Aadhaar as your financial address for making all payments. Next comes, digital QR code is printed on all the documents that are given out of Seva Sindhu for enhanced level of security. We also have a complete integration with the central grievance redressal system of both Government of India and Government of State, so that you can actually go and lodge your grievance, if any. We are integrated with Sakala, of course, for paucity of time, I'm just rushing, but I hope I am able to make myself clear. Sakala is, the mandate of Government of Karnataka under the Guarantee for Citizen Service Delivery Act. So it ensures, you get your services within the stipulated time, and there is also an option for online appeal under Sakala. So all these facilities also are available on Seva Sindhu. There is SMS and email integration for all sorts of application status changes, and also in case the authority wants any clarification, people can reach out to you through SMS and email, so that you can go on the website and add that additional document. Many a times issues such as jurisdiction, which is my jurisdictional office. If I am living on one side of the street, my jurisdictional office or the BBMP ward office will be different than if I am living on the other side of the street. And many a times locating the correct office, taking time off, a day off, going to the office, it is not a very pleasant experience. So we are integrated also with the Karnataka Geographical Information System. So we have 3 modes. One is depending on your IP address, the system will fetch the correct coordinates and route your application to the right office. Let's say you're sitting in Bangalore but are a native of Dharwad or Kalburgi, and you want to apply for something for a property located there. So if you select that location on the map, again KGIS will fetch the data and send your application to the right office. We also have integrations like chatbot for 24/7 support, and the list goes on and on. So Seva Sindhu does have a lot of technology integration, and that is how we have been able to scale. Just to add a couple of points. Seva Sindhu is based in, hosted in KSDC, that's Karnataka State Data Center, which is a Tier 3 data center, and we have a 99.98% uptime. And Seva Sindhu has recently, I mean, we are very close to 3 crore transactions now. So it's been going great. Thank you.
That's amazing. So, just as the government is attempting to solve complex social problems through innovative use of technology, there are private players like, of course, MSR and Accenture's Tech for Good, which is trying to do the same thing in the private space. So, whether it's monitoring the quality of water in low-income communities or precision agriculture, there are several attempts towards the same goal. So, Nataraj, I would like to ask you, given India's daunting challenges across various spheres, what are the top 2 or 3 areas where you think that, which urgently need innovative and possibly disruptive tech solutions to make huge impact on the ground?
So there is a caveat here. I am also a farmer now, a practicing farmer. So whatever I talk about has a mix of both the corporate background as well as my own experience, and you can call me as a as a smallholder farmer. So now, coming back to, so as you said, that India has is multifaceted. I mean, it's got many dimensions, and from a corporate perspective, if you look at it, when we talk about tech for good, what we also mean is that good for business also, because it cannot be just tech for good. It also has to be sustainable. So given that, what we did was that when we looked at India from that lens, I think a couple of years back, we published a report on this. So there were some 3 or 4 characteristics which used to come out. One was that, access to basic services, there's a lot of friction. So, and then second piece was that we are currently, very young in terms of our demographics, but the skill sets are an issue, I mean, for use in daily life. The third thing was that most of it is informal economy. So from a corporate perspective, if you look at that, when clients come to us, they are coming to us for solving their business problems. So when we looked at these 3 aspects, and then we said, how can we put digital technologies into this? We identified 6 areas. I think I'll only talk about the top 3. But the challenge was that when we mean digital in the larger context of the global thing, what it means is very different from what we actually mean here in India. See, for example, digital could be looked at as a market efficiency engine. But here, it's mostly about how do you provide access to people who do not have access to these kind of services. The second thing is that we are looking at technology as a means of reducing manpower. If we do that here, there will be social unrest. So here, it's all about how do you upskill people with digital technology. So given those kind of things, three areas kept, I said 6 areas, but 3 which were repetitive one was healthcare. So when we mean healthcare, I think it's been dissected a number of times here. One of the things we found out was that most of it is out of pocket. Even though there are insurance like Ayushman Bharat and everything here, most of the things are out of pocket. And one area where we found it to be very useful is that I think one of my doctors was telling me that the more number of hospitals does not mean we are doing well. Actually, it's the other way around. So that area where we wanted to shift from illness to wellness. But that means a radical shift to even our clients also, because our clients are also Fortune 100, Fortune 500 clients who have large healthcare operations. What we are telling them is don't get sick. So incentivize wellness. So that's an area where we have worked very well with many of the startups to how do you make people well so that they don't have to fall ill. So that is one of the areas which we think has got a lot of potential. The second area is, again, my favorite, which is agriculture. So one of the things we find in agriculture is that most of the people in India are smallholders, and technology which if we can import from the West into this region, it doesn't work out. And what we have figured out is that for example, personally I figured out is that most of the technologies like digital technologies, see, for example, I monitor my farm through satellite things, but what actually I see is very different from what I need. So for example, one of the biggest challenges here is that how do I use technology which is actually viable for the smallholder farmers? So one of them could be variable rate application of fertilizers. Fertilizer is a very big challenge for us because, not for me, as well as for most of them, because it's an input cost. And if you look at what kind of technology can we use so that I can reduce my fertilizer in putting itself based upon how the land is, that itself will be a good value add for me. The second thing is market access. Because like even with my background of digitally savvy person, I find it very hard to sell my produce at a proper rate. So that's an area where we find market linkages and access of digital technology which are relevant for smallholder farmers, a key thing. The third thing which we have found a lot of clients coming back to us was in the CPG, in the consumer packaged goods space. If you look at India, like most of it is the kirana shops. And there is a lot of wealth to be made. I mean, there is a lot of wealth to be made as well as a lot of inputs to be given help to those kirana farmers, kirana shops. And that's where a lot of we are getting traction from clients saying that can we do something in that space so that that as an aggregate it's good for us. So those are the three areas which we find a lot of traction coming up. And because of COVID, what's happened is that what we are also seeing is that instead of being customer focused, we are now trying to be life focused, because people are making choices which are like paradoxical. Like for example, I like organic food, but the cost is so high that I won't go for that. So what we are seeing is that we are seeing more and more of that in India too, where we cannot segment customers like what we used to do earlier,
right,
but we have to look at it from the larger angle.
Correct.
Of that. So that's where we see a lot of traction coming up from our clients.
So I'm health tech, agriculture, skilling, urban services, there are a whole lot of areas which seem to require investment, and so that tech innovation can be a sort of force multiplier and create huge impact on the ground. So Menterra is in the impact investment space. So impact investment challenges the traditional notion that social causes should run on grants, and whereas market investment should only be for profitable ventures. How do you decide among the many proposals that you get what is truly deserving of your investment? And in that evaluation, how important is the tech piece? So for example, would you fund a classic NGO which does amazing work on the ground but is low tech? So what do you think, Mukesh?
Yeah, so I think one of the important learnings, we've been doing this now for 20 years. We had an incubator, and from there we spun out this fund. One of the important learning was that in trying to deliver social impact, we have many problems to look at. It's important to be narrow-casted. So we launched our fund by saying that we're going to invest in only 3 sectors: agriculture, healthcare, and education. Within those 3 sectors, then we defined what the constituency is that we want to benefit. So the target segment is also very clear for us. Who is the beneficiary, who is underserved. Then in addition to that, we defined for each of the sectors what would impact mean to us. So in agriculture, working with small grower, Nataraj was just talking about it, how do we help them address issues of climate change? How do we make agriculture sustainable? That is one. In education, access is a problem. Depending on what family you are born in and which city you grow up, you can have very different quality of education. Healthcare is the same thing. So we wanted to deal with issues of access, quality, and cost. Now, this is at a sector level, but when we start investing in a specific company, we define a specific theory of change and we say this is what impact with this company will look like. It has to be sustainable because we are a fund, so we are structured like any other venture capital fund registered with SEBI. So we have, when we take money from our investors, we return capital, and we return capital with profits. So we may not follow like other venture capital funds, 35, 40, 50% IRR, 10x return, and unicorn and all. We may not follow that, but we want to address specific issues in a sustainable manner. What we have also learned is technology is a very important component of it, because there are many challenges. The scale in our country that we need to deliver solutions at, technology becomes an important part. I have a video clip to show. When you want, we can play that. Yeah, there's one example. So we funded many companies like this. I wanted to just show one example from healthcare, and we have examples like these in education and agriculture also.
The big problem with healthcare in India is that the disease profile of the country is changing very rapidly. We need a lot more preventive health. We need affordable, high quality health to be delivered to underserved communities at the prices at which they can afford.
We believe our device can detect infections early on and significantly bring down the amputation rate. We have finally validated the product and entering the market space. Now it's been used in 2 hospitals and we are really planning to scale up from now on.
This guy is a treated leprosy patient. He developed this very hypertrophic ulcer, which is not healing despite multiple courses of antibiotics. So we've taken the image, and now the device is just going to use its artificial intelligence algorithm. We'll get to know whether the wound is infected, and if it's infected, where it's infected. Before this device, we would actually have to take a biopsy. It might take as long as 7 days to help grow the slow-growing bacteria. This takes a minute.
So antimicrobial resistance actually can be attributed to one of the causes, basically could be misuse or overuse of antibiotics, which is not needed. So this device can help in this regard.
So this is the baseline image. This green image shows the amount of infection the patient has, and in a span of 40 minutes and over serial images, we can see with the help of debridement how the infection is going down. You don't need to give the patient any antibiotic, and in a span of about an hour or so, he's here, you've cleaned the tissue, he can just have it dressed and go home. It's a very positive outcome for him as well as us. The patient goes home satisfied, so yeah, everyone's happy. It is completely revolutionary. The more you use it, the better it gets, and the algorithm keeps getting better, and every couple of months we get new use case scenarios.
What really excites me is I want to get into food, I want to get into water, I want to get into any kind of pathogen detection. And now with Menterra, we are able to diversify, make it big, and explore a lot of options.
So the tech is obviously impactful, and like I said, it's a force multiplier, but is it enough is another question that comes up. So you may have brilliant tech, but in a country like India, which is so diverse and complex, you need an understanding of the social context if you want to deploy your solution at scale. And I think I would ask Bill, in your experience of building 99 Dots, did you have to understand the social context of TB, the particular unique aspects of patient behavior? Maybe you could share your experience with us about that.
Thanks, Vandana, and yeah, great to be here today. Yeah, so I think, I remember meeting with the Gates Foundation early days with 99 Dots, and I was among the strongest proponents and saying, oh, but it's so good. And this, senior executive who now is a really valued mentor, Daniel Chen, said, doesn't matter about the technology. Like, I'm looking at the technology in the system. So whenever you deploy something, it's how much better is the system, the health system, the context, because of what you're doing. And I think, it was kind of an aha moment. And since then, it's all about what can you do for the system. And it's tough for technologists. I mean, I come from compilers. So, you start with a programming language, you go to an instruction set architecture. For the most part, they don't change. You can just live in the middle and optimize, and it gets better, and it's great. My life now is almost the opposite. Like, you build something, technology, what comes in, you can't control. It's like some user inputting data. What goes out, you can't control. That's like some user looking at your thing. Basically, we're nothing. We're this little piece in the middle, and then this user ecosystem around determines whether or not something is getting better. And I think often that's talked about from the standpoint of early adaptation to users. Like, you need to be humble in early days to try to meet the needs of users, and we can talk about that. But now what I'm realizing is even more hard is in the scaling or post-scaling stage. How do you be adaptive to the changing systems and users over a long period of time? Because now we're in the situation, we did scale up a system, but the world has changed. It's 10 years later since when we started this project, and now there are different norms, different requirements. There's some people that like the system. We think it should change to adapt to the new world. So now, it's less about humility, it's more about courage. Like, do you have the courage to make your old users unhappy? because now there's actually an even more important thing for the current scenario, the current users. And so I think having that, courage that you can't satisfy everyone by the time you've gotten to scale, and Microsoft understands this, there's so much legacy requirements. I don't like the new version of Microsoft Paint. Anyone with me here? But yeah, so probably someone does, and it's valuable for reasons I don't understand, but that was a courageous decision to take that leap. And so I think, once things go to scale, we need courage to keep up with the times.
Right. Have you been challenged by inadequacy of data, which is notorious in India? We face it in social science all the time. So was that an issue?
Oh, right, absolutely. So, how do you discern what the reality is and so on in the field? I think data hygiene, we deal with this in maintaining the TB platform for India, that's, 30 million patient records, and there's variable, accuracy and fidelity of that data. That's a big push, actually, is to try, how do you go out and actually invest real effort in improving data hygiene instead of just the algorithms to actually make decisions on the data, but how do we check and inspect that we're getting the best possible data?
Correct.
I think is super important.
Right. Thanks, Bill. Apart from inadequate data, we have another fundamental problem in India, which is the huge digital divide, which Dipti referred to. So on one hand, we are attempting to create digital India, and the government is attempting to push more and more services online. But on the other hand, we have a whole lot of rural population, women, less educated people who are on the dark side of the digital divide. So as a policy person, my question to you, Nitin, is that how do we reconcile this contradiction?
Okay. See, first of all, I don't think the term digital divide applies to India in 2022 as it used to apply, let's say in 2004 and 5 when this word came about. It's not a divide where there's a line and there are haves and have-nots. What we have instead is differential empowerment. What I mean by that is, this differential empowerment is very smooth. Across the population, you can draw a smooth curve, and there are very highly empowered and not at all empowered people. But let's say this conversation, just say divide them into 3 groups. There are groups like me who are supremely empowered, right? I just walk around today with a phone in my pocket. I go to the airport, I show my DigiLocker, and my boarding pass is online. My entire life is conducted with a phone, and I can get through because I have an Aadhaar, I have my passport, I have all of bank accounts, all of that. On the other side, you have people who are really not connected at all, right? This is a small number. Although a lot of people, talk this number up, this is not a big number. In the India scale of things, it's not a big number. I think Aadhaar tells you, if Aadhaar has penetrated X number of people, that means 1.4 minus X is what is this. It's a small number of people. It's significant, but it's a small number of people. Then in the middle, you have people who are somehow enabled. Like they were talking about women who have to share a phone. Kids who have to share a phone to do their online classes. Right? Or a small business that depends on 2 SIM cards to carry out its businesses, right? So these are people in the middle. Now, the challenge for us is we've not been able to design I'm not saying this is not a criticism, but it's an explanation of what we need to do, is that we've not been able to design mechanisms by which we can correct for this differential level of empowerment. So I think Sanjay mentioned how they had an introducer system for Aadhaar. Right? That's the kind of thing you have to build in and bake into your app, your system from day one, knowing well that there are 100 million people who probably can't access it your way. Right? And in the middle, you have another set of people who have shared infrastructure and sporadic access. You still need to figure out how your app works for them. And then you have to figure out how it works for me. But even for a guy like me, people like us, handling issues of inclusion, redressal, recourse is hard, right? Now, imagine you need to get something done with Facebook or your Twitter account. Good luck trying to persuade those guys to do something for you, right? It's hell. Or you have an app which is a food delivery app or a home delivery app. By the time you actually get to a human being, If you're like if your friend is the guy who started the company, you just call the guy and say, hey, why is this happening to you, right? That's for most of us here in this room. But for people outside, good luck trying to reach a human being who will actually give you. You'll have a chat bot, you'll have and the chat, all sorts of things before you actually, so you don't get redressal, right? And that can be a serious problem. It could be a serious problem that I ordered lunch at 12 o'clock and it's 2:30 and my lunch has not arrived and I don't know what to do because the food delivery app has no way of solving that problem for me, right? So we've got to, as engineers, as technologists, sort of design this, bake it in for all three categories. But the second part is even more worrying, is in terms of differential empowerment of the citizen against the state and against corporations, right? I'm a free market capitalist, and I still am saying this because today the government has more information about you than you have about the government. So the government can come in and say, okay, Nitin, I got this, okay? I got two speeding tickets from Mysore 1 minute apart on the same road, just 1 minute, 10:31 and 10:32, and 1,000 rupees fine each, right? And now, what do? Do I pay the fines or do I not? If I don't pay the fine, as a law-abiding citizen, I'm committing an offense, right? And that has its own consequences. Or should I pay these two things and indulge somebody who's obviously done it wrong, right? It's the same with corporations. So now I think we've got to figure out mechanisms as technology. As a policy wonk, we have, we talk about data privacy and other kind of things. But as technologists, I think we've got to be conscious of this differential empowerment and prevent this from getting much wider. Because once it gets wider, the social consequences are much more dire than what we can think of.
Right, thanks so much. Dipti, would you like to comment on this? Do you think the digital divide is sort of, exaggerated? Have you seen people who want to access government services but really struggle with it because they may be even having a smartphone but may not know what to do beyond that? What's your experience?
I will slightly differ from what Nitin has said because I was just reading, the figures released by the National Family Health Survey, 2019 to 21. Urban males are considered to be having most access to technology, but that's also surprisingly only 71%. And rural women, obviously, are the worst affected, and the numbers given there are under 25%. So, and it's as recent as 2019 to 2021 data. Our digital divide does exist. I would also like to put things in perspective because, I always feel when it comes to government, misconceptions always outweigh. Government, especially in a place like India, it's a very complex socio-economic fabric. The kind of scale at which government operates is unparalleled. Practically 1.4 billion people are my clients, unlike, even other bigger corporations who have their own clientele and they are answerable to them and the shareholders. My case is not like that. The scale in terms of the sectors in which the government operates is also unparalleled. We just start thinking about it and then we realize how much we are surrounded by what government does. In our parlance, we always call it from womb to tomb. Everywhere government is there all along. That makes the problems that government faces very, very layered and very, very complex. So straitjacketing will not help in any which way. Of course, there are constraints of, for such a diverse population, they always cite this example for China where the head of the dragon is in 21st century and the 10 is probably somewhere still in 17th century. To an extent, it will also apply to India, given our socio-economic fabric. And, we also are a democracy. So things, the stakeholders involved, there are much more complexities here. So when it comes to dealing with any kind of problem, one has to be aware of, all these factors that government faces. And we're not here necessarily to do a step change, because the outcomes can be very difficult, or the fallouts can be very difficult to contain. So in government, we would always prefer to go in an incremental way. Given the set of these problems, of course, technology has been a big enabler, but it's only an enabler. It's not a panacea. You are showing some things that are being done in healthcare, but I was Deputy Commissioner of Chikballapur, which is around 50 kilometers from Bangalore, just after the airport. The same road continues to Chikballapur. It takes under 1 hour now with good connectivity to reach Chikballapur. It's extremely difficult to find doctors come and work in Chikballapur, even on contract basis, when government is ready to match the fees that they are getting in private sector, because you don't get to choose what you work on in government. You will get entangled in medico-legal cases, which not everybody is comfortable with. So working in government becomes very, very, different ball game. And when we come to digital divide, yes, things are improving. Digital literacy is really, going up. Government under Digital India has launched many, many initiatives like, National Digital Literacy Mission. There is Pradhan Mantri Gramin Digital Saksharta Abhiyan, where at least one person in each household has to be digitally literate. I mean, that's the mandate the government has decided on, and slowly and steadily we are inching towards it. But currently, to solve the problem, we have to go phygital. We have to have our network of common service centers across the state. And as part of EDCS, we have taken it in a big way. You all must have heard of Bangalore One. We also have Karnataka One in major urban local bodies in Karnataka. Now Grama One has started this Republic Day. So more than 7,000 CSCs have been established already across all 31 districts. And I'm very happy to say that on 10th of October, we clocked in our 1 crore transactions for Grama One, only in a matter of 10 months. We also have started Jana Sevaka, which is a next step, which is, your door delivery of government services. It has started in Bangalore. Last year, 1st November, it was launched, and we are gaining a steady, clientele for that. We have seen that people who are otherwise left out of mainstream, people who are senior citizens, not very digitally savvy, or just, even my parents sometimes are not so comfortable doing online payments because they don't know what if entire money in their bank account just vanishes. They read these in papers, in WhatsApp universities, everywhere it's there. So, people will still need some assistance. And we have Jana Sevaka where you can book a slot. The person will come to your house, will raise an application, scan all your documents, do your Aadhaar authentication. He's carrying all the hardware and equipment for that. And after the thing, we have a standard service charge of 115 rupees for doing each slot. And after the thing is done, under Sakala, you have a mandate that within a certain number of days, your service will be ready. And the person will come back to your house and deliver the certificate to you. We even have a wonderful experience that BBMP Khata has been transferred in 115 rupees. So you can trust in our system. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipti, for sharing. Yeah. A few months ago, I was surprised that in Bombay, if you have a house anywhere in Maharashtra and you live anywhere else in India, there is a system where a guy will come with a biometric machine to your house and get all your paperwork done, and you don't have to step out. And you could live in Guwahati and you could get your paperwork done for your house in Maharashtra. So clearly, at least the digital divide exists, but it's being rapidly, the government is trying to rapidly bridge it. So there is another divide which I feel is limiting the amount of innovation that we have in the country, and this is the urban-rural divide. So my question to Mukesh is, Mukesh, don't you think the whole startup ecosystem is dominated by the elite of the urban metros? Like, do you think investors like Menterra are doing enough for entrepreneurs and innovators in tier 2, tier 3 cities? As somebody, I believe, who was raised in a small town, do you feel passionately about this?
Yeah, I think I was not in Bangalore for till about 2019, and I was very happy with it. I was away from this bubble, the startup bubble in Bangalore, where we believe what happens in Bangalore is India, which is not. Short answer to your question is the issues of smaller cities is not getting solved, and the capital is not getting allocated. If we go by data, it is not. I mean, we can pick a few examples here or there and say it's happening. There's a lot more effort now from the government side. A lot of incubation is getting funded. A lot of activities are happening. So I think that push has come from government. And you will see in time, you will see probably next 5 to 10 years, you will see that change a bit. But still the whole ecosystem needed to support it is not happening. At Menterra, what we have started is taking a value chain approach. Like in agriculture, we recently launched a company which is working with small tea growers in remote districts of Assam, Nepal, and Nilgiris. If I was to go and find an entrepreneur who will go and sit with some farmers in remote district and help them with the agronomy changes to get the quality to a level where someone sitting in Europe or Japan would want to consume that tea, it's a difficult task. It takes a lot of effort. And technology doesn't solve this, right? You can't just technology will be one of the part of the solution, but it will not be the full solution. So the answer to that is, sometimes really studying the problems, throwing very specific targeted challenges and saying we're going to solve for this now, and then inviting, entrepreneurial interest, technology interest. On the same lines, we've launched a cancer challenge, which is on now, live now. We've received almost 60 applications. And cancer also, we didn't say we want to solve for cancer. We were very specific saying, how do we diagnose cancer early? In our country today, it's diagnosed between stage 2, stage 3. If you don't live in one of the large cities in our country, if you're in a small country, how do you detect it in time and how do you get the...
Yeah. I just want to respond to this.
Just
let me respond to this. See, first of all, again, in rural, urban, I think it's not helpful to think in terms of divide. It's helpful to think in terms of a gradation and a transition. Because I've lived in small villages, I've lived in mega cities, and it's always a transition. It has been, and now it's even more of a transition that, there's Bangalore, there's Tumkur, there is Chikmagalur, there are smaller and smaller towns you could go, and then you'll reach a one horse or one pony town along the road, right? So just look at it in terms of gradation. As engineers, I think it's really helpful when you think in gradations, when you want to design solutions rather than, binary or ternary kind of things. The second thing is, I don't think we should allocate capital in places where that capital, I don't think we should be trying to build startups in a small town. Because there is a reason why Bangalore is an entrepreneur hub. There is a reason why Silicon Valley is what it is. There's a reason why, even in the United States or in Singapore, there are geographical places where capital, ideas, culture, people, lifestyles come to meet, and something magical happens. And that gives massive returns on capital, massive returns on innovation, massive returns for people's lives, right? So what you should be thinking of is how do you make the Bangalore engine work for Tumkur? How do you make the Bangalore engine work for Chikbalapur, right? How do you make it work for Udupi? How do you make it for Siddhapura and Kundapura? As you go smaller, right? Because you can get those people here. I'm sure there are people here who are from all these places which I mentioned. There are people who know those places, the people who have lived there, who work there. Can we use the engine that is Bangalore or the ecosystem, and also maybe Gurgaon, Mumbai and all those places. Can we use the engine and the energy and the creativity which is in these places to solve problems there? Because you can't create that kind of innovation in a place which does not have all the ingredients, right? So as shrewd allocators of capital with a social conscience, I think it's morally responsible. The morally responsible thing to do is to invest more in Bangalore and make it better.
Right.
I disagree with the last statement, but agree with everything else.
I think you can. So we are nearing the end of this interesting discussion, but I thought that as we have representation from different stakeholders in the ecosystem, from government, from private sector, policy, impact investment and startups. So I was just wondering, maybe we could close by sharing some views on how do all these entities collaborate? How should they collaborate and how should they sync so that there's maximum impact on the ground? So Nataraj, any wisdom on that?
I think this is a good question because we are running a program. I think Sriram mentioned about that earlier, about a program called as Amplify. So what is Amplify? So Amplify is so you have people, you have startups, you have companies like Accenture, which is more into consulting and innovation. Then we have Microsoft, which brings in technology and research IP. Then we also have like deep tech startups from outside of this environment coming together. So only when all of these 4 or 5 elements come together, then we see magic happening. Mm-hmm. And I think for people who may not know Amplify, I think just go and Google Amplify in Microsoft and Accenture, you will get the link about that. And I think we have done around 47 startup scaling in the last 2.5 years now. So this is the 3rd year the program is running. And we find that to be very successful. It's very different from accelerators or incubators you see in the market. This is something where there is a lot of high-touch thing required here. And what we see is that most of the problems require a sales-led approach, in the sense that what we see is that it's not a product-led kind of thing where you have a product, you give it, and then it goes by itself. Most of it is sales-led, which means there is a lot of high-touch thing required here, and only people who have all of these qualities together in a group can actually make impact here.
Correct. Bill, any views on this, on how these various parts can sync?
Sure, maybe I'll just relate. I mean, one of the most successful programs that we benefited from was a public-private partnership where there was an advance commitment by government to deploy a winning solution in a sample of government centers. And I think that was really innovative because it brought all the best innovators to the table. They would compete for the privilege of deploying in the public sector, and then it also benefited the other way, that's how we got a foothold, and then that scaled nationwide. So I think more advanced commitment, and also more funding for outcomes as opposed to inputs. I think especially in the social sector, people rally around doing things that are new and crazy ideas and so on. Often those ideas need to pivot, and if they're funded for the idea, they don't change enough. But if they're funded on the basis of what metrics they eventually toggle, they have freedom to actually go after those. So I think more funding for outputs, less funding for inputs.
Nitin, any view on this? And if anyone else wants to share.
Since we are talking to a bunch of technologists, there's this very famous fable of a monkey. It sees a fish in the stream and says, "Oh, the fish is drowning." So it takes the fish and hangs it from a tree to prevent it from drowning. Right? So I think a lot of our intervention. I used to be an engineer at one point, so it's a self-confession, right? So I was that monkey who used to do that. But I think the most important thing as engineers, technologists can do is to understand the proper role of various institutions of society. Mm-hmm. What is the government equipped for? What is it authorized to do? What is its proper role? And how do we enable the government to do its job better? What is a non-profit organization equipped for? What is its role? What is its dharma? And how do you allow it to do its job better? What we should try and avoid doing is to do the other person's job. And when that happens a lot of times, I see, the government is somehow, it's not fixing the streets. So let me go and fix the streets. It's not my job. It's not an NGO's job to fix the streets. Right? Because there are other things, there is an issue of authority, legitimacy, and there are complex things which are happening in the streets which you don't know. So you let the government. So how do you now help the government fix the street? Right? It's not you fix the street. How do you help an NGO do its job better? It's not you do the NGO's job. Right? And as a technologist, what is it that you're best equipped for? And how can you use your best talent to solve these problems rather than do it, replace it?
Right. You want to say something, Mukesh? Dipti, you want to say something on this?
Yeah, I would just say that we probably need more structured collaboration. Right now, the collaboration is incidental, sometimes it's episodal. So we do not have to support any initiative. I think Sanjay talked about it takes a lot of time. Raghu talked about sufficient resources not being there. So if a corporate like Microsoft is working, if a funder like us are working at an initiative, there's a startup working. If 3 of us come together, there will be more power, there will be better results. It doesn't happen enough. Correct. I think it can be done more structured and more targeted.
Right. Dipti, any thought on this?
I think today everyone understands that, every stakeholder, be it government, be it civil society, be it technocrats, everybody has different strengths, and everybody will bring something different but positive to the table. So as long as we realize that, and as he said, maybe a more formal and structured mechanism needs to be put in place where this cannot become once in a blue moon event.
Correct.
That will, I think, take us a long way forward.
Thank you so much. We actually finished on time. I wrote messages to all my panel speakers saying you have to stick to the time, and thankfully they've done that, but there's been no compromise on the insight and sharing of experiences. So thank you so much. We're honored to have you here. And it's been an absolute pleasure to host this discussion. So the way forward is that we sort of take questions from the audience which are addressed to the panel.
Raise your hand and there are mics available.
So while considering any of these programs, be it bringing more technology to solving a social problem and so on, what role does research play in any of these things to the panel? Right, there is plenty of research in development economics and all kinds of areas in economics that have a lot of insight, but I hardly see a lot of startups and tech entrepreneurs using actual research to solve a problem that's already been solved in the literature, but it needs to be scaled up in the right context at the right time and so on. So what do you guys think about that?
Bill, what do you want to answer?
Yeah, hi, Krishna. Great point, I think. Krishna comes from economics, and I think there's a huge breakdown between, results that are shown to be good at a small scale, and then other people willing to pick them up and run with them. I think one of the problems is, finding the champion. So often the person who invents something is the person most motivated to see it succeed. And so we see in our little field of, ICTD style fields, the successful projects, they have to stop being researchers and they have to go become entrepreneurs, with the rest of their life. And I'm guilty of that. And that's the cost of actually scaling something up. So how can we make it easier to convince someone else to take my baby, right? And to scale it up based on the amazing paper I've written. That's, a high bar for a paper. It's not just it's not good enough for me to do it, by the way. Oh, it's great. No, I'm going to keep writing papers. You have to change your life and go scale something up. So I don't know. It'd be good to hear examples of that. I don't know if there were companies that were formed by people that went and read a research paper and were so excited to productize it, or how can we make that connection more? How can we bring the entrepreneurs that are open to different ideas, are ready to soak in, papers that we write, and then actually run with them? Maybe you guys could comment.
Yeah, sure.
See, one reason I like my job is that, and I tell this to my colleagues all the time, there's no domain of human knowledge that is irrelevant to a person working in public policy, right? The insights for solving public policy problems can come from economics, can come from evolutionary biology, complex adaptive systems. And the more your brain is trained to understand these disciplines, the better you will be at solving these problems, right? For example, we were talking about complex adaptive systems. How many people can process and understand complex adaptive systems enough to understand that traffic in the city is a complex adaptive system, and therefore insights from complex systems can be used to solve traffic problems, right? So those of us who are here who can process that kind of knowledge and solve it are in better place to do that, right? Because a lot of people who get into solving public problems don't have sophisticated science and technology backgrounds to be able to process it. Even economics, so sophisticated economic, no. So those of us who have that, therefore, I would think have a responsibility to be able to put that out and share it with others and say, hey, look, this is a problem, this is a complex, complex systems problems, I've solved it here and this is how we could put it out. Publish, it can be a blog, it can be a website, it could be, it could be a TED talk, but get that message out if you have an answer to some of these problems. It doesn't have to be the full solution, right? It could be an insight that creates that solution.
Just to add on to what Nitin said, I think use cases play a very big role. Any research that happens finally has to find some practical application in the field. So people who are doing research also should try and go one step further and study use cases around and make it available, because people who are in the tech sector are not necessarily economists. So somebody has to make it simple. Whatever fancy technology you develop at the back end, your front end has to be always very simple. And the person who is going to use that particular technology, you have to go down to his level of understanding and deploy things. Only then things will become more successful.
Yeah, I have a question for Bill. So I think you mentioned that you have a huge data set of 30 million patients or all. So healthcare data and accurate data, reliable data, hygienic data is like a rarity in Indian context. So what is it that you've either done or learned from this project that can be applied to other, for example, cardio is almost like, or rather bigger than TB, in terms of its impact and what it's doing to the population. So can something be learned from that?
Yeah, great question. I think in a way it all works backwards from what I've seen. So, working backwards from a decision point is when people really look at the data. So, for example, when they introduced the direct benefit transfer schemes in TB, like to actually pay patients, 500 rupees per month for completing treatment, then things like the patient name and phone number, bank account details, that data had to be accurate or people complain. I mean, they show up at your doorstep. It's like, I'm not getting my transfer. And so I think a lot of the data in the database, for health especially, people have no idea if it's right or wrong. I mean, if we're recording all kinds of comorbidities and different aspects that would be interesting for health researchers, it's never checked. There's never an incentive to go backwards and actually check it. So I think finding those incentives, way to work backwards, propagate through incentives for clean data. And sometimes that happens, like World Bank, their last loan to India's TB program had a contingency, like prove that you've deduplicated this fraction of patient names, because that was a big contingency with the payments going out. So then the incentive is there, and now we cleaned up all the duplicate names. Actually, not all of them. Many of them are now accurate. And so I think, yeah, how can we find those incentives, especially for the larger data sets, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I have a question for Mukesh. So you mentioned that entrepreneurs and technologists meet and it's more serendipitous, rare, one-off. What can we do as an ecosystem to make that more common?
Make them more?
Make that more common, those kind of No, my question is actually, you mentioned that when Vandana asked you the question about how the different stakeholders can collaborate with each other, you say that entrepreneurs, technologists, researchers, government, they do get together, but it is very rare.
Yeah.
Right? How can we make that more common?
So
more common case?
I think what we are doing is we are identifying specific issues where we are going to be allocating capital. And I'm sure some other investors would also be doing this. Sanjay talked about how they are going in a very specific way, solving specific issues. Right? So a corporate that wants to do this, if you collaborate with someone who's going to allocate capital after you've incubated a business, you shared some 5-6 examples today, right? So if the allocators of capital, some of them were saying that they needed capital, right? So then capital is also part of developing that. At the same time, working with incubators, working with researchers, he was asking, example of people who have done research-based thing. BIREC has an example of this, like some few hundred startups they have funded. But they've not scaled. If you look at the analysis, now they are focusing on how to scale them, right? So BIREC would have funded something in isolation of a funder or a corporate. So there was no VC involved in that process of saying, okay, this is a problem. We are all trying to solve it together. There was no corporate involved. And also, let's say, for example, when we are incubating a startup or when we are funding a startup today, it's a first generation entrepreneur who is a technologist, who is probably a doctor who has never built an organization. So sales related issues, they wouldn't know, right? So it could be Microsoft, it could be any other organization which has tremendous sales expertise inside the organization. Sometimes little bit of that knowledge early on in the business. I think Lakshya today, she was talking about, I don't even know how to select right CTO. I don't even know how to go about building the tech architecture. And by the time you do it 2-3 rounds, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough resources, and you run out of that firepower. So even if you have right problem, right solution, you haven't really scaled it. So I'm saying like this, collaboration between providers of capital, incubators of ideas, and corporate and government. If all four come together in very specific ways, it could be sector by sector, it could be theme by theme. Like cancer, I gave as an example. If there's a corporate who's involved in, they would say, okay, let's bring this whole group together and solve for these 4 or 5 issues in cancer. And solve not only for Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi. We talked about radiation, but there's some places like radiation. Center today, if you have to set up for radiation therapy, costs about 100 crores. How do you make it viable for a tier 2, tier 3 city which will not have enough footfalls, right? So now you need, again, research, innovation that full body radiation is not needed for every kind of cancer. You can go for miniaturization. Now, if you start thinking miniaturization, again, you will need input from multiple disciplines. And if we think about it together as a group, representing different disciplines, different stakeholders, then we'll solve for it better. Did I answer that? But happy to have more conversation on this. This is a topic that we've been talking to different players for almost 3-4 years now, and see how do we bring different pieces together.
Anyone else has a question? There's some people there.
So I'm going to ask 2 questions. Sorry, you can pick whatever is relevant. One is, of course, to ma'am. We always talk of public-private partnership. So I come from the eye care domain, where the blindness program in India is probably the most successful public-private partnership initiative anywhere in the world. But over a period of time, you find that that partnership element goes away, and the government becomes diffident in supporting. Like I think somebody mentioned, it's a central government program, but delivery is at the state. So we find that mismatch when you're working across geographies. So how do you make sure that this partnership element remains so that all the stakeholders are invested? That is my first. My second question is again connected to something that you mentioned. For each problem, there are probably 3 or 4 startups that are working on the same solution. Is there a way, Sriram sir, that you can get all these startups actually to talk to each other while they're trying to solve the same problem and come up with a more effective combined solution?
What you mentioned is a very valid point, but something that is also constrained at the same time. Government is a very abstract concept. If you ask what is government, we never really give so much of thought to all of these things. But what is government? Is it only the chief minister? Is it only the prime minister? Or who all are involved? And how frequently people are changing? We only have at max a 5-year mandate for any given government who come with their political agenda. Political will is another issue. In government, you always don't have the right man for the right job. So there are many issues that the governments face. So, when we see any 2-wheeler or 4-wheeler ad on TV, they say 0 to 60 in whatever seconds. So when we are structuring our programs, we will have to be aware of all these other constraints. You have to reach that critical mass in less than 5 years for it to reach to a level where afterwards it doesn't matter if there is a change of political mandate. So all these things are very practical and, they're very easy to say, but sustained efforts, because you will see, whatever are our priorities, and that happens more in government because of our, election systems and things like that. Somebody said things don't get implemented in West Bengal. Now, there's no reason. If you logically ask, there's no reason why things can't get implemented in West Bengal. But, things are always, or problems are not always so simple. Real world problems, as we would like to call it in administration. I always tell my husband and all, his IT colleagues that, you're all working with machines. They will do what you say. They will not question you back. You're not answerable to them. So things work at a very different level in government, fortunately or unfortunately. It takes time. As Sanjay rightly mentioned in the morning, it's patience. And you have to advocate. You can always reach out to government. Advocacy forms a very important part, because there are thousands of other things vying for attention, vying for budgetary resources. So advocacy always helps.
So I think we can take our seats. Thank you so much again. Pleasure having you.
Thank you to the panel and to Vandana for a wonderful session. I think there are a lot of interesting ideas and thoughts which got provoked. And we'll kind of do an extension of that in this last session, and she'll have hopefully all of us involved. So for that, I'd like to invite Samir, my colleague, Samir is another person whom we got into MSR, who came from a startup background. He founded a fintech startup called R2, clearly shows the correlation between nerds and Star Wars. And then, of course, we also got him to MSR to translate that startup energy here. Samir, all yours.
Thank you, Satish. Thank you, everyone, for a wonderful set of sessions. This session is actually just like a logical conclusion of everything that we've been through right now. We have so many smart people in the room, so passionate. We're all excited about population scale impact, right? As Shriram put it, trying to impact about 100 million people. So we need to try and, we're all working in our domains with our sort of focus, but how do we sort of come together? How do we make it sort of bigger than the sum of parts, right? So these were the 2 questions that we put up, and we would really like your views on them. I'll read them out very quickly. So what are the barriers in scaling the societal impact efforts at population scale? And how can the ecosystem collaborate to solve societal challenges and empower underserved communities in India? Now, the 2 questions are kind of correlated, right? There are barriers, and then we're also sort of not just discussing barriers in isolation. We want to sort of see how we can solve them. So feel free to like respond to, either one or both together, and then we'll get the conversation going. Yeah, please. Please introduce yourself very quickly and
all right, thank you. My name is Zainul. I'm part of a company called Tricog Health. We're in the cardiovascular space in diagnostics. First of all, thank you, ma'am, for coming here and representing the government. It's such a pleasure to hear from the government. We've worked with the government, and I really relate to the problems that you face on a day-to-day basis. Having 1.5 billion customers is not easy. I also believe that without the government in the room, having a conversation about social impact is actually pointless, right? I just want to having the ability to scale to underserved communities without government participation is really, talking about, you can talk about a lot of public policy, but it's the government that actually executes on a lot of these programs, right? We talked about the schemes, 7,500 schemes or how many ever there are. Now, I wanted to actually address Shriram sir's question about how do we make this structured, right? And I think Mukesh tried to answer that question. And I wanted to ask maybe around the room, and I'll give you one answer of an example that I found that has actually worked, for us as well, especially where companies as large as Microsoft, and we've been beneficiaries of this ourselves through Microsoft as well, but also others. So very recently, about maybe 3 years ago, we got introduced to a large pharma company. And this pharma company is, done a lot of good work. And through one of their initiatives, they started reaching out to state governments. And now, one of the things that they did was they had an innovation cell inside the organization. And they started filtering out startups. And so they picked, through a challenge, through a contest, through whatever means, they filtered out like 5 or 6 organizations in different, and because they're pharma, they're healthcare, so they picked healthcare companies. And they picked, these 5 companies, and now they're going state by state to the political, establishment in the state, to the bureaucracy in the state. I mean, we are talking to the National Health Mission directors directly. We would never be able to get that level of audience with the government, right? Of course, we've been doing that. We've been successful in some states already, but that's taken maybe a year, 2 years, in some states 2.5 years to get to that, that tender, that purchase order that actually makes the big break. But now, because of these large partnerships, and I think the reason is that many of these large pharma companies, and Microsoft, I know as well, because we've been part of Microsoft for Startups as well, they've got these channels into the government where the government trusts Microsoft, right? And so, because Microsoft has the research, horsepower to actually make a difference between, hey, this startup A versus startup B, please pick startup A versus B, right? They've got the ability to differentiate. I think that's very important to government as well, and I've seen that firsthand. So again, across the room, if someone's got use cases, examples of where it has worked, it would be great to have that conversation as well.
Thanks, Anand. Yes, sir.
I am Rajagopalan, a faculty at IIIT Bangalore. And currently I lead a project of modular open source identity platform, which helps various countries to create their digital identity program. We work with about 10 countries now, 8 in Africa, 2 in Asia, and totally about 350 million people. Philippines has already enrolled about 75 million, out of their 101 million population. So first question is what I am going to focus on, because second question is India. I have not worked much at Indian ecosystem to answer it. Sanjay is the best person for that, and he's around.
Sure.
What I have found in working with countries in Africa and other parts of Asia, as well as in India with governments, mostly with state government of Karnataka over 40 years, is that we do not think in scale. Now, you need some kind of an ability to think in scale. As Nitin said, you need to understand complex system in all other complexity. We can't get our head around complex system. There has been an attempt, I have seen it for 4 decades now, that any problem we tend to resolve it to very simple problem which we can address without realizing in that dumbing down we have lost the problem. So I think that I find it in other countries too, the African countries especially, that you need some, before even you start imagining a solution, we need to get people to think in scale, think in complexity, and that can be done only if you have a collaborative thinking. We are not doing that enough. It's like, for example, when we talked about all the stakeholders, whenever we meet as stakeholders, government or Microsoft Research kind of enablers or VCs, we are always trying to sell some solution or the other. Startups, it's like, if I have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We are not thinking together. So I think that is important, and I think it's good that we have people like Takshshila Foundation, and yesterday Nishit Desai was saying that he is trying to do something in Bombay in the legal and other frame. But I think it may be useful just to think together on a very complex system. So whether it is empowering visually challenged, I think we have close to 3 million totally visually challenged people in the country, or more?
More than that.
More than that.
More than 10 million.
And somebody was telling me, how many orphans are there in this country? I don't know, anybody can guess. There are about 7 million registered orphans in the country, registered in some location or the other. And if you are 18 and above, you are not an orphan. So it is people below the age of 18. And let's at least start getting, that's the major barrier I am saying, that we are not thinking together.
Not thinking together, not understanding the complexities of the system. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. There first and then Raghu.
Yeah, hi. I'm Venkatesh from Accenture. So one of the questions I have is from a lot of the first question, right? A lot of the societal impact we try to solve using technology innovations. And from a software engineering perspective, what I often see is that we have a lot of innovative ideas. We build good prototypes and we pilot things. But once things get beyond pilot and they have to be maintained, that's when things start breaking down. Because a lot of innovations, great pilots, but then what is the total cost of ownership? Who's going to maintain it? Once the corporates move out, then who's going to sustain it, I think, right? So that is a very important piece of the puzzle. So I think a business model that actually looks at the end-to-end value chain and looks at how things go beyond, pilots to, maintenance, upgradations, and all of that stuff, I think that becomes very relevant in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, innovators don't like the next phase, right, of maintenance. They find it boring. Right. But that's a critical step to have impact. Thank you. Raghu first, if you could get.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. some points have already been made, but I wanted to dig a little deeper on them, right? First, absolutely agree. You cannot achieve societal impact without government. I can't say this enough, and I don't know why lots of early stage innovators especially don't engage enough, right? Now the good thing is government is collaborating a ton, right? That's also should be recognized. What gets confusing is who in the government exactly do you work with? Who has as their responsibility to solve the challenge that you feel passionate about? Now that's where I think the role of, what do you say, enablers, incubators, collaborations, all these sort of, because ultimately I can sit and say, hey, I want to do this, but you have to find the right sponsor. Sponsor has to become the owner. Ultimately, until that thing becomes the baby of that owner, you cannot grow that baby, right? So that to me is sort of a key thing, and
going back to one of the points that you made in your presentation, that it's not just a small thing for the owner or for the sponsor, it is the whole system. Right?
Yeah, it's a whole system. Like they don't, sure, it has to deliver results at scale, right? So you need to think with the system's owner, right? Work with them to solve the problem, and have a lot of humility, like Bill and others said too, that your initial seed of an idea might just be that, right? You will get pushed from just doing 99 dots to the entire country's software system. So, because these challenges are complex, they are interrelated, and impact usually takes solving a cascade of issues, not just single things, right? So, but going to that owner, finding that, if there is just one thing, right? Yeah. For example, in health research, why am I working with ICMR? Yeah. I could work with any number of other organizations, create any number of platforms. Yeah. But whose baby is health research?
Absolutely. Thanks, Raghu. Ronak?
So I'll share some experiences from the first point. We do air pollution work, we stumble into government work, we run into tenders. The downside, I take your point. Honestly, as a startup, we are not an IIT, IS, with all due respect. What happens is, as soon as we say that we have government projects, no investor will touch us with a barge pole. As soon as we say that there are tenders as a part of our revenue, nobody's interested in funding a startup which works with the government. The second point I'll just briefly mention, I've been doing this for about 6 years, air pollution work, so I know all the startups who are in this space. We've actually become friends. Ayurveda is, we all do similar projects. In fact, the UP Bihar Ayurveda is involved with us. One thing we found consistent is, of course, there are American companies, European companies, which are also selling equipment in India. We found that the companies in the West, within the first 6 months of their formation, they look at the global arena as their market. And we in our 6th year are still trying to venture out into 1 city, 2 city. To give you an example, Clarity started in 2016, the same year we started. They raised 10 million, they are valued at about 80 million. Me and Ayurveda were sitting together, we were like, we are trying to still raise our first 4 crores. We have a term sheet, but the story is that Indian companies don't know how to go global. This probably could be our story. I don't know who else is, but we need help in understanding how to go global. Yeah. The last point I'll say about the ecosystem part, one word that comes from my mind is consistency. Awards are fantastic. We've got a bunch of them, but they were like a day event for us, honestly. They were 1 day's interaction. Consistency in the ecosystem is something which we really value, something which lasts for a few years.
Yeah, thanks, Mukesh, you wanted to? Sorry, actually was, why don't you go ahead? Sorry.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, my name is Vinayak. I am the CTO in Residence for a team called Microsoft for Startups. So if you need any tech help, happy to help, because I saw a bunch of questions around tech. So I have been working with various kinds of startups before joining Microsoft in this role. And what I realized is how incomplete my own education is, because a lot of these problems that are at a societal scale require multidisciplinary things. So I think one of the problems I think was rightly mentioned is a sponsor. But the other big problem that you have is assembling that team that understands the various aspects of the problem, right? When you build up a product, you're thinking about architecture, you have to think about design, you're thinking about how do you operationalize it, what are the incentives, how do you run it, how do you run operations, what are the tools for the people who are intermediaries. So to think about the entire system, right? And our education system is, in some sense, I would say for myself at least, the education is incomplete. So what are the ways? One is obviously educating yourself, but also I think finding out who are the complementary pieces of the puzzles, and where a lot of incubators, and I work with a lot of incubators, a lot of facilitators, is that having the right team to kind of attack that problem is a challenge. And I think partly as I've explored this problem, it's also because the maturity of the ecosystem, right? If you look at maybe the US, for example, which is maybe much more mature from a startup point of view, they have been through one many cycles, right? So if I were to look at evolution of India, like for example, use simple things like a product thinking, right? That can get applied, or whatever learnings from startups in terms of scaling, that can be applied to the social sector as well, but with caveats. And what those caveats are, I think that is where the multidisciplinary approach comes. Because if you're doing in healthcare, you need to understand, what it means to, deliver healthcare to people in India. You have to understand economics, you have to understand the incentives. As an engineer, you're not geared up. So how do you found that team is like a more important part that is often missed. And that's a big challenge as well. Both from an ecosystem point of view and also from a team that is actually solving that problem.
How do you have the capabilities? So actually, I wanted to make a slight change. We wanted to, because we're running out of time when lunch is at 1:30. So we want to explore the question about, we at Microsoft Research are very interested in deeply collaborating. We're really interested in having this population scale impact, right? How can we engage better? How can we collaborate better? We wanted to explore this question. What is it that we can do, to help you in your individual missions? Would anyone like to reflect on that? Yeah, sure.
So I think one of the areas which through the different, within this ecosystem, you have the government, you have technology, entrepreneurs coming up with ideas for social change and solutions. We have Microsoft Research focusing on helping and assisting or creating catalyst kind of positions to get that to scale up. I represent Rotary Bangalore Midtown, but it's the Rotary, system as such brings to the table one, respect from the government when we go in for collaborative activity, and immediate trust as well, that we would actually follow through and complete tasks which are, say, state level scale or national level scale, and sometimes global level scales which happened in polio. So one should consider tying up with certain NGOs which do add value or bringing an intrinsic honesty to the solution, as well as the fervor and enthusiasm of the solution of societal problems that we are changing. Once we look at that together, when you see powers like, I think the Gates Foundation has tied up with the Rotary Club for larger scales. Yeah. We are also looking at things that how we can work together with your foundation and your research to help scale up the mental health platform that we've developed. Yeah. And this has been developed by using core domain knowledge of psychiatrists and doctors over a period of decades and digitized it. We've worked now with the government, and we've got the mental health program and got associated for the state of Karnataka to deploy it across the entire state. Yeah. And we find that, yes, if you reach the right group of people within government, the acceptance level and the speed with which they are performing is amazing. Yeah. And the amount of acceptance we have got and the openness we've got, that across the table, take these 3 districts, we have so many mental health schemes over here, these budgets are yours, what are your contributions you add to it, and go ahead and roll this thing out. So this is really what can happen. So just to share that part,
Yeah.
so you can use that also in your thoughts.
Thank you for that. Yeah, please.
Sorry, my name is Amit Prakash. I'm at IIIT Bangalore and associated with centers which look at public policy, e-health, and accessibility. I had actually 2 points to make. One was, there was a comment, I think, by Vinayak on education system and how is it that most of us who have gone through the education system in India as engineers and technologists probably lose out on understanding what is there out in the society. So from that perspective, at IIIT Bangalore, we have been offering a program which is interdisciplinary, which is trying to bring them together, and it aligns very well with what the theme of today's discussion is. How do we get social sciences which allow us to understand social relationships, social structures, motivations better into the design of technologies, and how can we design technologies with principles that actually flow from what we understand of our societies. So that is one. The other is in terms of spaces, how can we create structured spaces where we can think together?
Yeah.
So I think universities are good spaces to do that, and programs like these are good spaces where we have a diverse cohort come in, spend a year or two together, and that's where we'll have all these thinking together opportunities open up. So from that perspective, I'm sure organizations like Microsoft Research, through their support for these kinds of programs and the government trying to get all these different stakeholders together into these kinds of thinking together academic programs, I think we can definitely do much better there. The other is in terms of the societal impact and population scale. I think from the Indian perspective, one of the innovations that has happened is we want our governance to scale up by scaling down. And that is when we realize that Government of India cannot do everything, and we need Gram Panchayats to take ownership. So when we are looking at population scale and when we are looking at scaling up, I think we have to look at local level institutions. So we cannot look at Bangalore only to provide solutions. We cannot look at Delhi provide solutions. We'll have to go to Tumkur and we'll have to go to Siddhapura, and we'll need, I believe, because there are certain sectors, especially the marginal populations that you're talking about, children who are visually impaired, children who are in orphanages. If we have to take care of their requirements, because these are diverse, a population scale or millions is not what will make sense. It will have to be very localized. We'll have to create those kind of local level institutional capacities.
Getting immersed into the context, yes, absolutely, makes sense. Yes, please. We'll just take one more question and then we'll obviously continue the conversations at lunch.
Yeah, hi. My name is Vinay. I represent a startup called Rido. We are building a mobility startup focused on livelihoods of auto rickshaw drivers in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. Just to answer the question on how Microsoft Research could be more relevant, I concur with my previous, the person who just spoke before me, that in the societal impact, unlike in the commercial scale or the commercial operation, technology plays a different role, right? The society impact is not when you solve it for 7 million people. But society impact is when you solve for each one of them at a level that the problem is no longer there, right? It's not about convenience, it's mostly about survival in the society. So I think if the research can now start focusing, I mean, we've seen a lot of startups wanting to be unicorns, decacorns, using technology as the ladder to get there. But if now the research can actually tell them that it's better to distribute the solution capabilities rather than distributing the solutions themselves, right? If the research can be around how that can be taken, so that goes back to the point that he was mentioning, that you have to have local solutions and local population. Why do we have to do it for 1.4 billion scale, right? Can we do it for a Gram Panchayat? Can we do it for a district? Can we do it for a state? If that itself can be a societal impact, then you will see that automatically it will get picked up by other neighboring regions and adjacent communities. So, I mean, for example, what was UPI? UPI was a solution that was built but distributed everywhere, right? The capability to solve that payment problem was distributed, and everybody did it differently, but using a common distribution capability. So I think the distribution of the solution capabilities is more important as we go forward in the societal impact, especially, as opposed to actually distributing the solutions and trying to acquire market share, trying to become a larger company, etc.
Right.
So that's, I think in the societal space, you need to have a population view which is different.
So encouraging more entrepreneurs, more solutions across this.
Charu has a question.
Yeah, so last question we can take from Charu. Charu?
Yeah, more than a question, I just wanted to just first say what a fascinating conversation the entire morning we've had, pre-lunch, of course. So don't want to hold you folks between you and lunch. But I do have a comment, and somewhat Sriram's in the room. He and I have talked about these ideas a lot. But since there's an audience out there, the point the last gentleman made is so relevant, which is, I think Microsoft's always taken a unique platform approach. We've always believed that it's platforms that we enable, and then ecosystems will build on top, right? So for all those startups and partners out there in the audience, right, I just want to say that we deeply care about creating the set of building blocks that enable population scale solutions to kind of get to market. And of course, I will not deny that clearly it's good for the business. But even beyond research, I just want to kind of call that out. Sriram, anything you want to kind of share in terms of kind of how you think about the collaboration?
You can also make some closing remarks.
Yeah. I can make, thank you, Charu. I mean, I want to make a couple of closing remarks, right? In fact, first of all, thank you all, so much for, coming here and sharing your views this morning, right? One of our goals in this space has always been, not to be like an ivory tower lab that writes papers, but makes benefit to lives of people on the ground. I mean, that has been our intent in this space, right? And we went through our journey by case by case, right? Like things like Digital Green and 99 Dots, we spun off, we sort of learned from the experience. And that's actually one part of the journey, right? But I think it has become increasingly clear to all of us that work in this space that we have to bring stakeholders together, right? So far, and our initial journey was actually not just being a lab, but let's do spin-offs, let's engage with users, and have that part of the journey. Then it became very clear to us that we have to actually engage with government, right? And actually, for the first time, I think in these events, we have 2 VCs in this room. I don't think we've had, we're really glad to have Sanjay and Mukesh here, right? And at the same time, right, like we also have, Rohini was here for a long time, most of this morning. She is from our sales and marketing organization. She's our NTO, Microsoft's NTO, National Technology Officer. And Charu is actually a very senior leader in our India Development Center, which is a product building organization. I mean, she represents the whole of cloud and AI, or Azure, in India, right? So one of the things that I'm personally interested in is, how can we graduate from these one-off end-to-end engagements? I mean, as a lab, right, we have graduated from being a silo. We now know how to do things end-to-end. We have had specific experience with things like Digital Green, 99 Dots at Karya we have launched, right? We have done that, right? But what we are grappling with now is actually, can we go from that to doing something more systemic, where the feedback loops are much more intense, right? And Charu and I partner quite a bit, and we have the ability to actually also bring product engineering muscle to these ideas, which is actually a completely different scale. To give you an example, right? One of the things I said initially was that there is actually one part of the India stack is actually called DEPA. DEPA stands for Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture. So researchers in this lab, right, worked together with iSpirit and so on, and they designed a technology standard called confidential CCRs, confidential computing regions, right, to do confidential clean rooms, to process data in a private manner. And Charu now represents a product group that can actually build product scale versions of that, right? So now we have open source versions of that we wrote together with iSpirit that the community is using. And somebody asked, right, when that goes to scale, who now maintains it, right? So what we are trying to do, right, is to bring our stakeholders both outside Microsoft and inside Microsoft, right? Because Microsoft Research is only a very small part of Microsoft as an organization, right? We have product building capability and so on, right? So we are at our stage in our journey where we want to figure out how to bring these stakeholders inside and outside together. So my desire is at a minimum, I want us to meet like once in 6 months or something like that to share our experiences like we did today. By itself, that is super useful. But what would be even more aspirational is that by doing this, we not only just sell what, and somebody else mentioned that, right? I don't want this to be selling what we currently have, but graduate to trusting and thinking together. So that's, I hope that we graduate to that at some point. Okay, so thank you and enjoy your lunch. Yeah, I don't know whether Charu, whether you wanted to add anything more.
No, I just wanted to emphasize that point on the open source implementations that we will co-develop with the ecosystem. I think it's really important that we embrace that approach. Helps us kind of make sure that there's a lot more kind of inclusive approach in general. And of course, while we may have commercial implementations, the open source ecosystem, the ecosystem around us, I think co-contributing to that is going to be crucial as well, right? So I just wanted to, you briefly talked about it. I just want to emphasize that being important. So if you want to just spell that out a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Absolutely. I mean, I think, corporations are now at a stage where engaging with the community, things like open source are integral to what we do, right? And we have learned how to do that and how to build commercial versions of them. Those two are not mutually exclusive for us, right? So I want to conclude by thanking the team that put this event together. I want to thank the Sky core team that consists of Tanuja, Vandana, Meena, you should stand up. I think you'd introduce yourself. Samir, Satish, Chris, Soumya, and the entire facilities team. Vaishak, the IT team. We have a research fellow program and many volunteers in the research fellow program. Ashia, I saw her around. Yeah. Arnab, Sanchit, Advait, and Nidhi. I think this program was, I remember the first time I heard about it was like 3 months ago or 4 months ago or something like that. So a lot of thinking went behind the scenes to actually get the right set of people. And I really want to congratulate and thank the team for putting this together. Thank you. Now enjoy lunch. Yeah.
Thank you again. So lunch is served on the patio or the outside deck, just beyond this cafeteria area. And there is space there to stand, and there are tables put up there so we can all gather together and exchange more ideas together. Thank you again very much, and look forward to more interactions like these.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.